The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of this station and/or Confederation College.
So who we have with us today is Kevin Najawan. Kevin's an Ojibwe and Anishinaabe firekeeper. He was instrumental in organizing a really unique movement, I will say, called the Walk for Nations back in 2011, where he took 4 Anishinaabe youth and 4 adults, and they walked across the country. And it was called the Walk for Nations. And we're gonna ask Kevin to elaborate on that in just a minute, but I just want to let people know ahead of time that the topic that we're going to be talking about today it might be a little, well, it's definitely going to be a little controversial. It's certainly going to ignite a little bit of emotion, I'm sure, in some people.
Hopefully some discussion, which needs to happen.
Yeah,
right?
There's a lot of stuff happening right now, especially right here in our own community of Thunder Bay, that we really feel needs to be addressed. And it just so happens that Kevin's still with us. He's been visiting with us, and we thought, you know what, let's take advantage of the opportunity and bring Kevin back in, and let's talk about these issues because they're really creating a lot of problems. And I'm going to say it. The word that we're talking about today is racism. Yeah, and in particularly Anishinaabe or Aboriginal, racism. That's obviously rampant now in Thunder Bay, but it's an ongoing issue in this country. And of course, we know that racism is
on this planet.
Is
period.
an issue on the planet. Yep. So, Kevin, thank you for coming back. We really appreciate you being here. First, let's talk about your Walk for Nations, just briefly. Let's talk about that again, because I think it's important for people to understand that it was a walk for all nations.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Hello, greetings, listeners and viewers, and thank you for having me back again, Eva and Kevin. The whole reality of our world is based on education and programming, and the reality is that children are not born with racism. They're taught hate. We have to deprogram ourselves and educate ourselves. And the Walk for Nations was a collective of many of these histories that we do share. And what had happened was that a good friend of mine had put together a nonprofit organization called the Seventh Generation Healing Network. And that was a collection of elders, traditional knowledge keepers, youth, artists, musicians, and we were to unite ourselves to help get out of this misery and these ruts that we've been imposed upon as First Nations people. It was part of prophecy as well that 7 generations ago that there would be youth and a collection of all nations coming together to help bring back the true knowledge, true root history of our global indigenous relationship with Mother Earth and with one another. So we took it upon ourselves to formulate ourselves into a nonprofit, and we made a journey that was going coast to coast, which happened back in 2011, which we walked 8,000 kilometers. We had an RV with us that was part of our shelter and for protection and help keep us safe and out of the elements. And it was also from one of our allies. We were building a network of all nations, and within the Medicine Wheel teachings, for our listeners and viewers, the Medicine Wheel has the 4 colors of man: the white, yellow, black, and red, coming together collectively and evenly. And so that is one of our teaching tools of our fair and equitable part of this circle of life. And we took those traditional knowledges and wisdoms to share with our people. And one of the teachings I do share from there is the longest distance on earth is from the mind to the heart, and then back again from the heart to the mind. And our goal there was to reach the hardcore youth, the hardcore First Nations communities that were out desolate, that are very suffering from all sorts of symptoms, from colonization to genocide to disrespect to the worst case scenario you imagine: drugs, alcohol, suicide, rape, You know, it's in the family. We're doing it amongst ourselves. We cannot point fingers anymore. The reality of that message was that we have to empower ourselves as individuals, as human beings, to understand the trauma, our own personal traumas, to be able to support each other through our own personal experiences, through traumas, to not point fingers, to take responsibility, like it or not. And it's a really hardcore message, and we had a really hardcore walk. We walked coast to coast. We went into communities, and that was very important. We also went through Thunder Bay as well, and we had 4 youth with us that were going through their own growing pains as well. They were young adults, 20 years old, and they were, in those heavy fields of drugs and alcohol, suicide, sex, prostitution, everything that's upon us today that we just, we're getting so numb about, and we're having to, all of us, come to terms with our own reality within this world. And our own reality is programmed by television, historical programming of, lessening someone else so that you're better, whether you're a white person or a classism, whether you're rich or you're famous. You look down upon people, you look down on one another, and you separate yourself from the collective.
And I think, too, Kevin, what I really liked about your message, and the message continues today, right? But what I really liked about the message is that it's about all people, because the issues you're talking about are not just First Nations issues. I mean, these are human issues that just seem to be sort of in a condensed community of the First Nations community. There seems to be so much more of it, and but maybe we're wrong in that. Maybe we're wrong in that thinking.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
We can't say that it's unique to any one group of people.
Of course
it's
not.
Just, it is everywhere.
Right.
So I mean, the fact that a Native person is speaking up against this sort of thing doesn't make it a Native issue.
Right.
Right? It's still a human issue.
But I think, too, that we need to acknowledge the fact that there is still a great deal of oppression, of lack of understanding, right? Be it through education, not getting the right history, or limited information in our own upbringing, in our education, or maybe even experiences that people have had where they create their own prejudice and create their own perceptions. But I think that we really need to acknowledge that racism is, especially with the First Nations community, is a big issue.
Well, absolutely, and that brings on violence, that brings on harassment, that brings in psychological, spiritual, emotional, all kinds of attacks on the human, whether it's an individual or a collective community, this side of town versus that side of town, I'm in the intercity or whatever, you cannot get away from it. It's coast to coast, it's global. The reality is that, humankind has been cut from their collective consciousness. We've been pitted against ourselves. There's greater histories. We've opened that door with our modern knowledge tour regarding greater collective consciousness and historical, programming that has taken its part. In Europe, like we mentioned, we were at this conference just recently.
That's right.
It was called the All Nations Women's Gathering of Mother Earth, and this was in Manitoba, and it was at Whiteshell Provincial Park on
just over this past weekend. Yeah.
This past weekend, and I stayed on. I was in Thunder Bay here, and I invited Ava out to this very important gathering of women, and really it does come to the onslaught and the total dislocation of the women and their right to be mothers and mothering Earth peoples, to help guide families and children and the communities. A lot of the women these days don't have that opportunity to know their traditional role within the family, within the communities, within themselves. They're looking for dependent relationships that are boyfriends, husbands, and lonely. They're all of us, we need human touch, we need human love, and that's very important. So to be able to just bring this back to our home here in Thunder Bay, to our hearts, is that yes, there is something that is tearing us apart, that is people are meditating on hate these days. They want it for all the wrong reasons. Maybe they might feel right reasons. They want to feel a part of something, and they want to blame. Our communities, our First Nations communities, will say the white man, blame the white man, blame, this history. And I think that's very important that that conversations be spilt like that. But the reality is that it's programming. And going back to this women's gathering, that there was women from Africa, there was women from Europe, there was
Brazil.
women from South, Central, North America. From all over the world, these women gathered, and we were at a full moon ceremony. And this full moon moves in many traditions and many stories to our grandmother moon and the teachings of the moon. And in Europe, the women were ostracized, they were burnt, they were, there was this
witch
whole
hunt.
movement of the witch hunt.
Yeah.
Witch hunt, actually the old term in Old English is Wicca, Wiccan, and you put the two C's together, it's witch. So in Old English, it means unlicensed sorcerer. So how could someone give and take your supernatural powers, your God-given gifts? And really, that's where we've all been disempowered. We've been just programmed to be slaves, to be, families that our goals are very simple, for vacations to Disneyland, Wonderland, some fantasy land, and get back to school, get back to work for your pension. We're really hijacked our people, our family, our minds, bodies,
And again, I just want to reiterate, Kevin, is that when you say we, you don't just mean First Nations people, because I know myself. I mean, I felt that there was this disconnect and this separation, right, between First Nations people and then me being white, feeling like it was always a First Nations issue, and the First Nations are this was my own prejudice that I totally acknowledge I had until these last few months. Didn't know I had, mind you, because they were unconscious belief patterns that I took on from my own upbringing and being from New Brunswick, and and even coming to Ontario where people call them Aboriginals, right? I didn't know that language. For us, it was Indians or Native. Right? And so even just having to learn to use the right language, it just, honestly, I felt so pressured because I just didn't know. And I think that's what it comes down to, is it truly was, for me personally, it was ignorance. I just didn't know. And I think that when we can finally get to a place where we know better, then maybe we can do better. Right?
absolutely. And ignorance is bliss. Everyone
Sometimes.
everyone loves that. Get into your iPods, get into your Snapchats, get into your Twitters, follow Hollywood all around, and ignore your own responsibility to your person beside you on the bus, or someone that needs help on the street. There's so much education that's out there. The internet is so full of education that you can get out there and get what you need out there and navigate your own experience and fulfill your own desires and passions out there. And a lot of those are limited belief value systems that have incarcerated our minds and hearts into fast food cultures, fast food living, ignoring the heart and soul of your children, your own life, your own family, your own relationship with your community. It's us that have to create and recreate those realities with our education, face-to-face talking circles. This eagle that I carry, this eagle feather is helps with that. To help understand that higher consciousness, that we rise above these lower levels. They're very important to learn, mind you. The world has a great responsibility to come together, and we are coming together globally, and the capacity now with modern tools is so tremendous that we're just missing our life in our own way. We're moving at 100 miles going to work, red lights, green lights. We're conditioned to this numbing down of our relationship with our children, our families. Children are being born these days that are just immediately put into schoolings and taken away from the nurturing of mother. And
2 years old, here's an iPod, and then shut up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pacify.
I mean, we have a
Yeah.
friend who calls these, the classic WMD from George Bush, weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? He calls this a weapon of mass distraction.
Well, you
So,
know,
I mean,
Nikola
it's-
Tesla, one of the greatest physicists and scientists on Earth, has created the cell phone, wireless technology. There's inventors out there that had already created free energy for this world, have already made progress in technology and mechanical tools to help alleviate the suffering. You know, petrochemical dependencies that's going on, these XL pipelines that are coming through your backyard, my backyard, and they're spilling into our fresh, pristine territories, water, the land. It's outrageous, and it's not our issue. It's our issue collectively, you know.
Right.
So this is really where we're at. So you talk about racial discrimination. There's a saying out there by this that we're all chickens fighting over feed. Little do we know that all of our heads will be cut off, you know?
Really,
Yeah,
though.
You know, and really right now we're fighting against ourselves, our own communities, First Nations communities, non-First Nations communities. We're fighting for the right to be at some podium, some political podium, whatever, you know. We're charged by corporate interests. Maybe a raise, we'll get a raise, or someone gets bought out. You know, these presidents, premiers, prime ministers, they're all corporate executive officers, you know, CEOs that have been put in place for the corporate elite or corporation mentality, and it has really nothing to do with the people. And I've been able to, through my own experience, been able to learn and live and actually walk my talk, you know, and be able to help. You know, I'm a human being as well. I have my own life to live as well, but I've dedicated my path and my journey to help connect people and help us bring ourselves together to make this better for our children. And that's what our goal was with the seventh generation prophecy, is that everything we do and say extends out to 7 generations from now. And here we are totally involved with one another in so many ways. And how do we educate, and how do we participate into
Well,
wellness?
how do we bridge the distance, right?
Yeah.
Not just between our hearts and our minds, right? Which actually is what needs to come first, probably, in order for us to get to a place of resolution and peace amongst all people. But how do we bridge that gap? I mean, there's been so much in news recently with Tamara Ward Johnson, you know, and it's okay that I'm mentioning her. She and I chatted today. And even last night, most recently, you know, where a couple of Aboriginal men were attacked. And I don't know all the details of that, and I won't claim to know it, but it doesn't seem to be a coincidence, right, that this is happening. And so I think that we need to, I like your approach, Kevin, and I don't know, I know you speak for the people. I wonder how deeply ingrained that is in the First Nations community. Now, as you said, we just came off a weekend where we were at this all nations women gathering in Manitoba, and I can tell you firsthand, the women who organized that, they're the grandmothers, right, of the First Nations community, their community. The women who organize that, not just from the experience of being there, but from actually chatting with them, they have awesome intentions. They wanted to bring everybody together and to say, hey, you know what? We're not just First Nations people trying to lead this march. We want to bring everybody on the planet together, to be walking together on the same path towards the same purpose, which is to be walking in alignment with our soul's purpose, to be, you know, in alignment with the you know, Mother Earth, and doing things that are for the higher good and not destroying the planet or not destroying each other. And that became very clear to me when I was there over the weekend. But what I do wonder is, and maybe you can speak to this, Kevin, is how deeply entrenched in the First Nations community is that way of thinking, of bringing peoples together? Because I think that needs to be talked about.
Well, you know, my shirt that I have here says fighting terrorism since 1492.
Homeland Security.
It's Homeland Security.
And just for people, in case they're not seeing it, there's 4 First Nations men on the
Yeah.
front with rifles.
And it's comedy, and it stirs up a lot into people. And the reality is, how deeply is it entrenched? It's very deep. It's now into generations now since contact that there has been genocide against the good human being, which is Anishinaabeg. And Anishinaabeg means all peoples that are in tune with those harmonious values, with their relations with the animal kingdoms, the plant kingdoms, the kingdoms around us in the waters and in the sky, and our other dimensional kingdoms that we have yet to understand. That new world orders are suppressing. There's also interdimensional thoughts, quantum mechanics, quantum physics. A lot of new fringe science is tapping into these greater consciousness within water, within elements, within spirituality. And it's happening. It's slowly happening. So we have to embrace this time on earth. Find your call. What is it? And a lot of us do not have that calling. We're in Confederation colleges, and people are schooled to become themselves. But really, in our culture, that we are chosen our parents. We know what we're going to do, and we know how we're going to leave here. So us as spiritual people coming to earth, becoming human beings, Kevin Nadjuan, and my spiritual name, my spirit is Chagijik, which is heaven. And that was a big responsibility given to me when I was young, and I still have that responsibility. I speak on behalf of myself and my children and their children, and I'm not in any politics or in any way, but I'm with the people. And that's very important these days, is these political leaders, whether they're misinformed, they're miseducated, or they're running some hidden agenda for continued destruction and racism or corporation or what have you. People are beginning to see these things, Now, how do we unite as people to disempower these, is to begin to start small with one another. Start in your home. Start with yourself, as a matter of fact.
In your own heart.
You and Kevin have a very good opportunity to share, with Thunder Bay, and it's neuro-linguistic programming. I sat in one of your sessions, and that was very important, that you reach the core of an individual and release them from all these misconceptions that they've had since they were children, that block them from becoming truly a crystal clear helper and beautiful human being, And those are in our teachings as well. There's a lot of modern and traditional knowledge coming together that will embrace this new world that's coming, and it's prophesied that we are all coming together collectively. And this is you can find it on YouTube, you can find it on television, you can find it in the movies. There's a lot of influence coming into our lives. And just regarding the moderation with regarding eating and the consumption, whether you're on your iPhone or Facebook or internet too much, or drugs or alcohol. An elder told us as a youth group, we asked him regarding drugs and alcohol. We said, what about drugs and alcohol, grandfather? And he told us, he goes, too much syrup on your pancakes will make you sick.
Right.
So
right.
That's really where we're at, overconsumption, moderation. The gun doesn't kill people. The alcohol does not, create the matter.
Right.
You have hidden issues. They come out when you're intoxicated. You're not well. You're not thinking straight. And there is a possession matter out there that that spirits move in the body when you're under the influence. As the baby's crown, the little crown of a baby, the soft spot. You have to protect your little children because of they're so vulnerable for inside influence.
Well, that's interesting, because even from an NLP perspective, we teach that children's minds are like a big open funnel. Yeah. And everything just comes right into the mind, and there are no filters. There's nothing preventing that information.
Up until the age of 6.
Right.
It's just download.
Right.
There's no critical faculties in place that allows any discernment about the information coming in. So, I love the whole concept of 7 generations down the road.
For sure.
Right? I love that idea, because it's what we're doing right now, right? If we hold this concept of 7 generations down the road, is that what am I going to do something different now? Because I have the thought that what I do is going to affect 7 generations from now.
Yeah, because it gives more forethought
And that's
into our
positive
actions,
as well,
right?
right? It's
Yeah,
not
for
just
sure.
negative. So if I
Right.
throw this plastic bottle out, right, or if I, help someone transform their mind, right, that is going to have ripple effects down to 7 generations. And I think it's an amazing concept that everyone needs to embrace.
And you don't know what you've got until it's lost or gone, right? And you asked me earlier about, okay, what is it going to take for people? Some people have near-death experiences. They've drowned,
Exactly.
they've been hit by a
catalyst,
car.
Yeah.
They've been in war. They've been in war for the wrong reasons. These wars that are running the earth, that are corporate wars. We have many stories of veterans that have been come back with stories about regarding that they've felt so shortchanged in their own home welcoming, and as well
or threatened by the very government that they
Served.
serve.
Yes, and absolutely, they
Right.
become awakened and they have
Yeah.
PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? That a warrior goes out there and sees death, sees murder,
Sees destruction.
and they don't know how to
Deal with it.
deal with that. And within our traditional cultures, before a warrior was going to war, he was prepared through ceremony to be able to be what he needed to be. And when he was to come home, that he was sitting outside of the community, and they would go to him or them or her and help them become clear and free of that's what's in their mind and heart, the blood on their hands. And there are ways that we have, whether it's traditional or modern technology or wisdom or ceremony, that help us to become those better human beings with our relationships.
Well, it sounds to me like that's a sort of a decompression time that traditionally the First Nations community would take upon themselves. But just to talk about war veterans and so forth, I mean, what we do, from my understanding, is we send our soldiers to Cyprus to drink for a week or two before they come home.
That's decompression.
Yeah,
after the
I'm
theater
sorry,
of war,
but that's not really decompression.
Yeah, party
That's just
time,
drink
2
your
weeks,
problems away for
let's
a week
go.
or two, And then they're coming home still with all of this overwhelming, extrasensory, like just multisensory information that's just coming into them, and that's in them, in their hearts, And I think that that's key in us understanding how things like racism can happen, right? Because
Well,
it's our
absolutely. I mean,
experiences,
that's a great comment, because we had a conversation with a former veteran who had seen some bad stuff.
Former soldier, yeah.
Former soldier, and I threw out the comment, because I used to be a police officer, okay, for 5 years, and one of the and this is something that I inherently knew, but it was told to us, and say 90% of the population is inherently good, and if given the opportunity, they will do the right thing. Okay, it's the 10% that typically the police certainly deal with.
It's kind of like the rotten apple that spoils the
Yeah,
bunch, right?
But I mean, I mentioned these figures to him, and he looked me square in the face and said, "I don't believe a word of it."
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? Because from his perspective, of course, and his experience, he was always dealing with the absolute blackest of humanity.
No pun intended, because
Yeah.
he really was dealing with Africans, right?
No,
He
but I
was in
mean
Africa at the time.
absolute worst
No, I get it.
part of a human being,
Right,
regardless of where they were from.
right.
Right? I mean, because he was in Yugoslavia and Croatia and all
Yeah,
that
and
stuff,
but he
Afghanistan.
did develop his own racist thoughts,
Sure, but it's based on perception.
right? Because of his
Right?
experience.
So what event has transpired in someone's life to create the perception of the divisiveness that ends up causing behavior of racism? So what is there? What is it?
What is causing that? Because Kevin, you've even experienced racism. I mean, tell your story real
Well,
quick.
I mean, quite simply, I was born in Africa, right? And I remember this very, very clear. And I don't. It was just you're the only white kid on the block, right? And there's a poor kid. There's a kid now that's in Nova Scotia, I think. He's the only black kid in the community, and he is getting pummeled.
Right.
Right? Pummeled. by the locals, kids his own age, kids at school, and it's absolutely disgusting. So the incident that sticks out in my mind is that I was running after my parents' vehicle, and I tripped and fell, and all the black kids that were standing around just erupted in laughter, right? And the instant that happened, it was this this intense feeling of being very small and insignificant and at the butt of everything.
Right.
So,
And it hurts.
well, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely, right? And not knowing how to deal with that, you can carry that, and it's just a memory for me,
Right.
right? I don't begrudge anybody or any one of those children because I don't know them,
Right.
and even if I knew them, it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, and I mean, we even spent all that time in India, and we experienced racism there. I
Yeah,
mean,
of
you know
course,
what? Being singled out because we were white,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
having the whole white tax. You know, if you're white, they're going to charge you more.
So the question is,
Yeah.
what experiences are being experienced that cause the behavior of racism?
Or the programming, the conditioning
or what
that comes from a
programming? Because
person's
this is
environment.
learned behavior, like
It
you
is
said.
learned behavior.
We're not born like this.
Absolutely not.
All right. I mean, we can go further down the rabbit hole and say, well, there are potentially some unconscious beliefs and unconscious energy flows throughout humanity
Right.
that end up having an effect on us as to whether or not we behave in a certain way. The work that we do certainly goes beyond certainly this life, and those things come up, right?
Right.
But we always like to say that, and this is a way of dealing with this, is that it's a metaphor for how the mind holds something in place.
Yeah.
So be it a problem, be it a solution, be it a behavior or a belief. So what we like to do is actually get down to the root cause of it. So there is something somewhere or a series of events that cause behavior, the behavior of racism, the behavior of hate, that exists. So it's important for people, I think, to truly get informed, to truly get educated and not be closed-minded to other people's not only experiences, but viewpoints, points of view.
Right.
Because it's about trying to change, we need to change our focus. We need to change our focus from the differences to the similarities.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, because you breathe the same air that I do, right? The same air that Ava does.
Yeah.
We sit in the same sun,
Yeah.
We
right?
might have different color skin, but we're
Yeah.
all human.
Well, you know, it goes, okay, you want to go down the rabbit hole, right?
Let's do it.
Let's
Let's do it.
look at this. There's, look at Toronto, multicultural, international world. It's got a lot of wonderful history on First Nations territory, and it's got First Nations from all around the world, Indigenous Africa, Indigenous Asia, Indigenous Europe, Indigenous, so, okay, now here we are, we're all getting along down in Toronto, and you know what, we're all great workers. Is that the goal? Is to come together as a great slave society for who? The 1%? Now, I'll tell you, there's a system out there that colonizes the world and annihilates indigenous cultures, whether you're white, black, yellow, or red.
Doesn't matter.
Your grandparents, greatest grandparents, what did they do? Did they farm? Did they hunt? Did they fish? Did they do it for the king? Did they do it for the queen? Did they do it for the chief? Did they do it for their family? Today, what are you doing this for? Your pension, your children, your family. Is it sustainable for how long? This water that's flowing into your home, is it going to be good forever and ever? Amen. There's so much depth and layers. And why did they wipe out indigenous shaman societies, the traditional knowledge keepers, that could shapeshift and that they could do ceremony and travel throughout the world in the cosmos, and also interdimensional travel? These are not movies. This is not science fiction. It's for real. You got to look at...
And they did great healing.
Yep.
And they did great healing. So we have to look at what it is. Why... Okay, they have all the territory now. They have all the land, the water. They have the resources.
The money.
What is it that they want? You cannot eat money. What is it? Is it gold? Okay, you cannot eat gold, silver. Is it because there's some slave cosmic Star Tribe out there running the earth to just run this slave world. There's a lot of thought like that.
Sure, absolutely.
Star Wars. Star Wars was taken from traditional knowledge out of the Southwest regarding our relationship with Star Worlds, and the Chewbacca, the Bigfoot, is in our society. He's a helper. He's an interdimensional traveler. Make fun of him, have fun, whatever you wish. Our society's interpretation of Bigfoot is it's not in tune. He's a teacher of honesty, and to be honest, that is my helper, is Bigfoot. Sabe, we call him in our language.
Right.
And we were also talking about little people. The little people in our language, Piansug, Big Wajanini-sug, this is little people. We have these little people that are supernatural forest people. Misla Maganogo, these are little wee
Hence the
people.
Ewoks.
Yeah.
And Yoda, use the Force.
Right.
Use the Force, Luke. The dark side is strong. It's very relative. They take a lot of traditional stories and bring them into storytelling, which is great for the youth and the children, and makes some Hollywood famous movie or something. Avatar, for example, that the producer. The writer James Cameron, I believe his name was, spent time in Temagami, in the sacred forest, in sacred circles, learning of the interconnectedness of the whole, from the individual to the whole.
He's even from Timmins, Ontario.
And so here we go. We got this situation coming up in the Ring of Fire up north here. We have all these chiefs that have supposedly signed off. These are bought out chiefs that, take their pay away. They're not going to be who they are, right? They're bought out. They're systematically signing on to agreements that have no responsibility to the sacred relationships to the land or the 7 generations.
Or to the people.
So what we're having now is the Ring of Fire. Okay, let's all make money. Big dump trucks, big car, big business, construction, mining, resource extraction. It's already happened here. The people of Canada are not reaping any benefits from this. How many millions, trillions of dollars is Canada in debt? It's run under New World Orders. Not to go too far out, but bring it back home. You have a capacity within the individual to understand these things. And then you could sit back and say, well, it's out of control. I give up. I cannot respond. Yes, you can. When you start tapping in with a collective consciousness, with an individual as their single most important friend and enemy on earth is yourself.
That's true.
And you start working with the self on an individual level, okay? I had enough of this. Give me some keys to help myself. You cannot help anybody else unless you help yourself. So, that's one thing I've learned on my own journey was to help myself. I've have a lot of crabs in the bucket, we call them, where the mentality where you get up, you feel good about yourself, but everybody pulls you back down,
Yeah.
So that's the kind of the story of these. There was a white crab picker and a native crab picker, and the non-native white crab picker has got a lid on his bucket, and he asks the native guy, well, why don't you have a lid on yours? He says, well, when the crabs get up far enough to the rim, the others pull them down,
Yeah, you don't got to worry about it.
Yeah, so there's stories that can help teach children, right? And it's all stories. And we have to remember we have an individual responsibility. Don't turn on the TV, put your feet up and kick back and grab your six-pack and just let the world flow. Go for it, maybe, but all of a sudden you lose your family. You lose someone close in your life. You're going to go into depression. You don't have the proper tools to deal with depression. And you begin to spiral, and you know what? Your employer kicks you off the team. You have no job. You're on the street. You don't know why someone is on the street corner, whether it's physical neglect through their, not having the finances, or maybe they have some psychological factor that maybe they had mercury poisoning in Northern Ontario by big industry, Ebi, Abitibi, that had poisoned purposely First Nations communities in the north. So you have them coming south here that have very serious disabilities, that were put onto them through poison,
And see, this is the information I'm talking about that not everybody's necessarily privy to. And so we're moving through this world with such limited information, which is totally ironic because we have an internet that's full of information. Yeah. But it's really hard sometimes to navigate those waters because it's
trying to sift
be
through
discerning,
everything,
right? Yeah. But that's where I think we need to come back to, like you said, Kevin, we need to come back to realizing that we need to take personal responsibility, because even with racism, is it not just a result? Is it not just a result of our own limited perceptions, of our own life experiences, of our own conditioning, and everything that we've taken on from our environment, be it from our parents, from school, from television, whatever it might have been? So really, to me, and I mean, I'm willing to be corrected if I'm wrong, right? But racism seems to not be the problem, but the result of the real problem, which is what's this disconnect, like you talked about before, between our heart and our minds. And I think that if we get to that place where we take that personal responsibility and start to realize that we're just operating with all these unconscious beliefs that we didn't even know we damn well had, right? And then we can correct them.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's important now, because you mentioned this, is to talk about the cause and effect equation, because it's about shifting perspective. And if you were to look at this equation, you'd have a C on one side with the big Pac-Man, right, the greater than symbol in the middle, and then E on the other side. Now the E is the effect side. That's where blame and reasons and excuses exist.
Right. Fault
You
finding.
know, is where you're pushing the responsibility of your experience in life outside of yourself.
Which
right?
then becomes disempowerment.
It's total disempowerment.
Right.
So it's all about the weather's fault. It's my car's fault. It's the other driver's
It's
fault.
his fault because he
It's
did
his
that
fault.
to me, or my
You know,
mother
or-
was abusive.
And this
or
is where
whatever it was.
victimization lives.
Right. Right.
All right. So it's because of someone else or something else or some other society or some something outside of me that's causing me to not only feel the way I feel, behave the way I behave, all right,
think the way
and
I
think
do.
the way I think.
Yeah.
So with that, and there's plenty of people on the effect side of the equation,
Oh, well, we've all been there at different
right?
times,
At some
right?
point.
You know, there's a sickness going on, and that sickness is in individuals, and sick individuals run the sick world, you know, and so that sickness starts from an individual,
Right.
and then it goes out, and everybody's sick. So big pharma knows this. Big pharmaceutical companies know this. They're giving chemicals to people. It's perpetuating the sickness, and the reality is that there are cures to that. And when you deal with your emotions and your traumas and your selfish self, you begin to become better. You know,
Well, it's
chronic
empowerment,
pain
right?
comes loose.
Yeah.
You know, all sicknesses within your human system, your organ system, is related to your fallouts with your emotions on many levels.
That's right.
And when you
Yeah.
deal with that, it starts to shift.
Yes.
Yeah. You
I mean,
can
we had-
truly heal.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we had someone that attended our weekend and has had chronic low back pain for 20 years. And it just in that weekend,
dealing with the emotions.
dealing with the emotions,
Yeah.
Yeah.
back pain's gone.
But again, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. That's what all this is
So
coming
we're
down to.
we're on Camp TV in Northern Ontario. This is
Yep.
new stuff. This is breaking the ground. A lot of people out there are really just like, wow, I just listen to CBC and that's it. You know, we
Yeah.
have to raise the bar. We have to pick this up.
We have to talk
It's
about
moving
this stuff, yeah.
fast. You know, you have to pick up your feet and tie those shoes up, get your runners on.
Yep.
Keep up with this, you know.
Yeah.
This ain't just about running the fast lane to McDonald's, to your work, to the bank, to pick up the children, go back home and start again.
Because you're going to be left behind.
Yes, you are. And you know what? Our elders out there, the growing population of retirees is the baby boomers, you know. And you know what? Perhaps they've got 10 years left in their life to go live out their whole life of slavery, you know. With what I mean is like have a camp, have a cottage, have a boat,
Live on
you
your
know,
pension.
and hopefully your wheelchair can get you on the boat and out on the dock and bring you out fishing, you know. But
Yeah.
no, it's not happening. We have generations now that are inheriting the sickness of previous generations, and we cannot blame those generations. It's a mindset that has been programmed into people. It happened in Europe before contact. It's around the world. You cannot blame a white man, yellow man, red man, black man. It's in there. You know,
it's not about, but also at the same time,
India is
it's
colonized, right?
totally.
Yeah.
And
But
Britain
it's not
left
even.
India a long time ago, but
Yeah.
they already have it on automation, you
Yeah,
know.
It is.
the,
It's on
the
autopilot
programming
right
is
now.
definitely there. There's
And
no
we
question.
met these
It is
guys from
systemic.
India there at this gathering,
Yeah.
and this guy's got a program there about nonviolence, and it's he's up for a Nobel Peace Prize for
Mm-hmm.
regarding his school and methodology of countering the system
Yeah,
Mhm.
peacefully.
peacefully.
And it's
through
not
nonviolence.
about staying on that, like Kevin said, on the effect side of the equation
Right.
and placing blame. It's about acknowledging, okay, yes, these things are true. Yes, these things happen to us. But you know what? We need to take our personal responsibility back, which means get empowered, because
that's where
then
the
we can
magic
do
is.
something. Yeah, because then we can do something about it.
Right, because if
As-
you exist on the effect side where you're waiting for the weather to change to be happy,
Right.
right? Or you're waiting for your car to be fixed to
Or
be
waiting for
happy,
that government check to come
Or
in, or
something.
whatever it might be. Right.
all right? If you're doing that, all right, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Nothing, because you're waiting for someone else to do something about
Yeah, we
it
just
for
gotta.
you.
It's like Kevin said, tie those shoes up and just start
And
running.
move,
You know.
and just do
Take
something.
action.
So the magic
Yeah.
happens when you come over to the cause side of the equation. Say, what role am I playing in this?
Right.
What are my thoughts and my feelings and my beliefs that are either holding me back or limiting me somehow, right? Am I prejudiced? Right? Do I have these
And getting
beliefs that
real
are causing?
honest with
but
it.
you got to get honest with yourself.
Well,
Yeah.
institutions protect this knowledge to help people. Okay, I
Yeah.
read this article regarding the cure for cancer. You know, and the way this doctor could only present this article was that it was a cure for acne.
Oh.
And what he said was acne-ridden people, that it was based on low self-esteem, picking on yourself, bad energy flowing through your own self, thinking of your own self-worth, and you begin to break out. When stress hits you, you break out. You're eating sick junk food,
Which
you
is
know,
stressful to
which
your
is stressful
body.
to the body of the animals that were killed in the first place. So you're eating a stressful, your
to start
cycle,
with.
your system is
Yep.
stress. You're breaking out. It's not inherent in in anybody's genes. It's because of the matter of fact of how you deal with your thought process to the world around you.
Yep.
So what this fellow's article was about was that within our mind that we have the capacity to heal ourselves and to rid ourselves of cancers and particularly other diseases that are in our bodies. Disease, you break it down, is dis-ease. You're at dis-ease
Which
with
means you're
yourself.
stressed.
You're at home. You're worried about your boyfriend. You have no trust issues. You're dependent on someone else. You got to take back your life.
Yeah.
It's hijacking at its finest.
Yeah.
Terrorism.
Yeah.
Fighting terrorism since 1492.
Yeah.
So now all of society, anybody who stands up against the big patriotism move like of the U.S., you're considered a terrorist. You
Yep.
fight.
That's
You know,
right.
I was been a union activist for years, and they're almost on the threat to national security too. Unions have changed Europe. Union is solidarity. Under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, an individual has the same right as a corporation. A corporation has the same right as an individual in the human Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But a group of individuals in a union do not have rights as an individual. So you have to do that math. Corporations are getting away with so much, and we are having to be responsible as people. A lot of voting just took place, and that's not going to help. That's just, the voting is not helping. The government, is for the people, by the people, and we have to take that back. A chief, as a matter of fact, a traditional chiefdom is the people, right? The individual representing the people is a representative of the people. He's a public servant.
Mm-hmm.
In our communities, we have chiefs that are Indian agents. They work for Indian and Northern Affairs. They get paid by Indian and Northern Affairs. Our communities believe that our system will change if we vote for a new chief, a new council. It's the same thing. Vote for a new mayor, vote for a new council. They all biting for their own little
But
things.
it's still putting the problem outside ourselves, isn't it?
Absolutely.
know?
Sure, there's function for society to have rules and regulations for cars, for youth to understand how to drive a car, how to drive it responsibly. It's like your own body. You have to, when you come into this earth, and traditional knowledge and values, the children are given traditional knowledge and values to become that good human being. How to respect their relationship with fellow animals, fellow fish, fellow birds, with the plant kingdoms, and you become that good human being. So you are taking control of your body.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's a great master consciousness that they call it God or the Great Spirit, or this source or this oneness, and it's a new age movement that's taking off. People are finding it, and they're finding salvation within those knowledges. It's not flake societies. There is some real tangible knowledge coming through. It's part of a prophecy of the old coming new again. And we spent some time with the women this weekend out in out in Whiteshell Provincial Park out of Manitoba, and that was a gathering of women from all nations once again, and the responsibility of the women and the divine power of the feminine. And this world has been run under the masculine energy, which is killing and destroying the female energy, and that's Mother Earth. That's the reproduction of the women themselves, and the reproduction of Mother Earth with her overseeing of her kingdoms of fish, animals. What are we all going to do? Go to Walmart and live off McDonald's and clown around with clown food? No, we can't. You become the clown.
You know what? When we were there this weekend, and I just want to touch on that because you brought it up, but what I saw was a coming together of everyone, and all of those women. I mean, we had hug breaks, right?
Yeah.
Which was suggested by a man who was a part of the visible minority, right? He was there to facilitate, and he was a black man.
Yeah.
And I mean, he put the sneakers on and tied them up,
Yeah.
and he decided to say, "Hey guys, let's take a hug break here."
Yeah.
And do you think that it was just First Nations people hugging First Nations people, or people that were white hugging people who were white? No. It was everybody embracing each other. And I saw so many tears shed over the weekend.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of tears shed.
It was a rainy weekend as well.
It was a rainy weekend.
Mother Earth was
It wasn't
crying.
just the rain coming down.
Oh, it rained all weekend. But the thing is that the tears that were being shed, I think, and I mean, there's lots of different reasons people were processing. It was a
It's
very
healing.
high. It was healing, and ultimately, it was that realization that we've spent way too long separated from one another and separated from ourselves. And when people come together in unity like that,
Yeah.
wow, is there power in that?
It's going back to very simple sharing, right? And going back to water, and we're realizing the consciousness of water is beyond our imagination on connecting us together. And so when you release your waters, that's healing. And a lot of people these days do not know of that power to cry, as men, as strong men, crying and whimpering and falling down and going into a fetal position and just letting it go because you've lost your life, you lost your children, your job. You're a human being. You're reborn again.
Right.
And so we sit around the fire and we share that, and we do sharing circles, hugging circles, crying circles. Because that's where it all starts, with the people, the community. We all have a relationship with the elements of the universe, and how do we re-establish that? And we have that knowledge still intact, that we're helping each other, and this is what this gathering was doing, getting back to the simplicity of us being all our relations, right? Metaquios, within the Dakota language, that language is that we're all related, and Einstein himself has adopted that philosophy to help him create the theory of relativity.
Right.
And light speed, for example, from A to B is measured, but who says where A starts and where B stops? So you say...
Or that there's anything faster.
So, yeah, so then there's
'Cause there is.
also spatial time, which has no beginning, no end, and everything is light speed. So
Right.
when you look at, relative theories, whether they're modern theories or international indigenous theories of our existence,
So I just want to cut in here because I know our time is starting to
Yeah.
come to a close.
Okay.
And I just want to ask you, Kevin, what do you think we can do right now as human beings? Let's just say in this country,
Yeah.
okay? If you want to chunk it down even further, in Thunder Bay even. Okay, because we started off this talk talking about Thunder Bay and how the racism here is rampant, and we're seeing evidence of that. What do you think that we can do as people to finally mitigate these issues of this issue of racism? What do you think we can do and I want you to speak as a First Nations man who's experienced the racism, who's been in the corporate world, who's had the experiences that you've had. I mean, just give us some idea of what you feel we could do.
I believe it's very simple. Find that forgiveness for yourself, for those that have perpetuated or perpetrate these darkness on each other and in society, and find compassion. And as well, you find what helps within your, there's prayer. We call it prayer, but it's actually a way of living a good life. Deep down inside, we know what's right and wrong. Children know that. And you don't have to keep yelling at your child. You don't yell at a plant to grow.
Right.
You nurture it with love and kindness. And there's a past, present, and future in our traditions, and we call it right now. And that love is guarding this right now. So we have to get back to that unconditional love, right? And it's not so easy when you're so driven by fear. So there's also no fear, which means that you also have to look into, allowing yourself to become water, this Bruce Lee mentality.
That's right.
We have that in our philosophies. And right now there's a lot of ceremonies going on for the water of Mother Earth. And all you people out there at camp and in Thunder Bay, you can jump in a lake and go enjoy yourself. Around the world, you cannot. It's salt water, it's contaminated water, it's poisoned through petrochemicals. So enjoy your waters. Think about that love. Put that in your water before you take a drink. Pray to your water. Send it love. Be grateful. Be thankful that you have this life. And begin to start working from small little things, because the little things make the big things. And the only things that you can do in your life that's really what it is. The only things that you can do in your life.
That's right.
Don't try
you gotta take responsibility
to conquer the world, right?
Deal with yourself. Yeah.
Well, and we
And-
always say you want to change the world, change yourself.
And just
Right.
look at building your own family in your own neighborhood. And begin to start connecting with those good healing circles, those good power circles. And when you start letting go, new things come in, right? So you have to empty this cup that's full. You cannot fill a cup that's full already, right?
That's right. And I will say that I hope that people in Thunder Bay get that message, and that
I want
we're
to give
able-
everybody an assignment to do.
Really?
Yeah,
Yes,
because
yes.
awareness is a big part of the equation,
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is.
right?
Oh, I know where you're going with
You know
this.
where I'm doing with this.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Okay, so for those of you that are listening and watching,
Yeah, that are questioning and
they're questioning.
yeah, but
and,
those bastards.
and you're
that did
still
that
on the
to me,
effect
and
side
those
of the
guys,
equation. No, that's okay. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's okay. That's where you're at,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So here's the assignment, and that is, I want you to take some time,
Yeah.
and I want you to think about every person in your life or situation, and what you don't like or hate about that person or situation.
Right.
And write it down, point by point, everything. Okay? The next thing you're going to do is when you get to the end of your list, you're going to take a look at everything you've written and you're going to ask yourself the question, how is this me? How is this me? Because our perceptions become our projections. And if I have a victimization mentality or perception, right, I'm going to see everything out there in the world that's going to say, hey, you're right, you are a victim. But when you switch that mentality, right, or that perception, you start seeing other things and possibilities and options.
And I think really what that comes down to is when every time we look at somebody on the street that we want to judge,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Or ridicule for them being in the situation they are. Or every
Yep.
time we look at someone who has a different color skin than us and we think that they're less than we are, or we judge them for whatever reason, I think we need to look at people and just say, how is that me?
Yep.
Right? Because the reality is we are the same, we are one. And I think the closer we can get to that realization that we are one
Yeah.
and the same, then the less problems of
The sooner we
racism
get to
and
that,
things
absolutely.
like that,
How are we the same?
the better this
Versus
world's
how
going
are
to
we
be.
Take control of your life, right?
Yeah, that's 100%.
Energy and motion is emotion.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
you got to look at everything you're doing. Is it governed by the past or the future?
Right.
Not many people talk about what's happening right,
Right
now
now.
in their own
Yeah.
lives.
That's
Right.
right.
So you also put that down on your paper.
Yeah.
What do you like to do in the future? What's running you from the past?
Yeah. And let it
what's
go.
going on right now? You know.
Yeah.
You know.
So that's I think that's a good place to leave it.
That's
Yeah.
some
I
good
think
homework.
that if we that's some good homework for
Good
people.
homework.
And reward yourself. It's very powerful times. We're
Yes.
witnessing the most
Dramatic
heaviest
change
times
in human history
Yeah.
right
and
here.
in our spiritual teachings, that a lot of spirits do not want to come to this earth right now because it's so heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You know, we have issues. We have a hidden backpack on our back
That's
that's
right.
We call it a spiritual backpack, and it's all full of this world. If you imagine the Atlas character with the world on his back, that's
Yeah.
what we
Yeah.
have.
That's right.
So we have traditional knowledge to take and put that away, you
Yeah.
know, and
So let's start using it.
we have
And
to
you're
connect.
only allowed so
Right.
much
right?
baggage on the plane,
Yeah.
right?
For the
so
plane to
so
take
we're
off.
taking back
Yeah.
over Mothership Earth, right? And
Yeah.
this is it, and we're all family on board, and it's
We
for our
are.
children, and
Absolutely.
it's very kind and gentle movement, and
So I think the message is clear: is forgiveness and oneness, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for those people
and
who
celebration.
who want to hold on to that anger and that resentment and hatred towards another person,
For
just
what
know
purpose?
that you're hurting yourself.
For what purpose?
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you
And
can't
so-
get anywhere with that.
Yeah, we need to
Yeah.
start letting this stuff go. We need to start coming together. So that's
Now,
now. so that's
Yeah.
that's thank you so much.
Thank you too,
Kevin,
Ava,
for
Thanks,
and,
Kevin.
being
and
here
listeners for
sharing.
allowing us to just share our
Yeah.
hearts and minds, and that's really what the goal
It's
is.
a
is,
tough
you
subject,
know.
but really, I think as humans, we
have
make
to-
things more complex than they have
It's
to
the
be.
onions, you know,
Yeah.
tear the onions apart and cry
Sure.
and
yeah.
Sure.
make some good food.
Yeah. So next week, this is who we have coming up. We have Mary Toko coming up. She's going to be joining us via Skype, and Mary has a long biography, and I'm just going to keep it short. Basically, what she's done is she's the director of vaccine research and education for Michigan Opposing Mandatory Vaccines, and it's a watchdog group responsible for protecting the rights of parents to make vaccine decisions for their children. Mary's been researching vaccinations for over 30 years, and she's a wealth of information. We got the chance to hear her speak in New York City
York,
a couple of years ago. We were very impressed with the level of knowledge that she brings to the table.
Tremendous knowledge. yeah.
And I know that some people feel this is a very controversial subject, and
That's
we've
right.
already gotten some feedback from
Please
people.
call in.
Yeah, and that's what we suggest is listen in and call in if you have any comments. Mary can hold herself, and she can hold her own and handle those objections, so we welcome that. So Mary Toko next Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, right here in the Mind Vault,
The Mind Vault on Camp TV.
where we'll be taking a
.ca.
look inside vaccinations.
That's right.
Bama
Next week.
pigua min.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everybody for listening and watching.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Miigwech.